Hey, look, we're live. It happens just
Hey,
like that. I am Ani. That's Teresa. We'll get started in just a moment. But as it is the top of the 9 o'clock hour, I've seen my old Tiki. Um, we are going to mess around for just a moment to give folks a chance to gather around. This is that time. We are. This is that time. This is now. Bridge to a better world.
we'll be back in a moment.
Oh, you're still here.
Well, I'll still be here. They'll be puttering with tin toys and things. Tiki ain't working too good. All right, you're tuning in to the pregame show on This Is Now Bridge to a Better World, and we'll be back in moments. This show is going to be about the full court press, and I'll explain shortly.
Alrighty.
Shall we?
Yes.
All right. Come here, Drinky Beard.
And good morning.
This show is called This Is Now, Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell,
And I'm Ani.
and we're here to bring you a positively revolting look at the news you're not supposed to know. And you have a story about Iran. Did you want to start off with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, so there are many things happening all over the world,
Headline.
and there is a really interesting thing happening in Iran right now. You may have heard about it. In Iran, protests are growing after Masa Amini died in custody last week. Her arrest by the so-called morality police led to um, circumstances that caused her death. The 22-year-old Kurdish woman died in custody after being detained for allegedly leaving some of her hair visible. And that's in violation of an Iranian law requiring women to cover their head and all of their hair. Witnesses said Amini was severely beaten in a police van. She was later hospitalized in a coma 1 week ago today, and she died. Iran has curtailed access to the internet in response to the widespread protests. Specifically, they have curtailed access to WhatsApp and Instagram as they try to stop the continued protests that have been largely led by women. In video footage that has been posted over the last several days, women are seen burning their hijabs and crying out for an end to the dictator. At least 7 protesters have been killed over this last week in the nationwide protests. Nagar Mortazavi is an Iranian American journalist. She's a political analyst and host of the Iran podcast. She was interviewed on Democracy Now! Earlier this week, and she explained that the so called morality police has turned into a harassment force targeting women and some men on the streets of Tehran. She said that the anger against the morality police and the violence that they've been committing on the streets has been building up for years, and that anger coalesced into the protests that we are seeing this week after the death of Masa Amini. Women have been pushing back against the morality police individually or in smaller groups on a case by case situation whenever they were encountering the morality police. But this time, things seem different, she mentioned, because there seems a collective pushback coming from the streets. Mortazavi further explained that in the past you would see women take off their scarves, but then when police were around, they would put the scarf back on quickly. She said, but in these protests, the hijabs are being burned. When you throw it on the fire, the scarf is gone. It cannot be retrieved. So it is a sign that enough is enough, she said. That's a show of defiance. Also, women are cutting their hair, and that is a sign of grieving. It is a sign of anger. So, grieving for Masha Amini, showing that women want to take control of their bodies, have their dignity and their rights. And that was a statement from Nigar Modazavi on Democracy Now! I do recommend that you check out that whole interview. It's really, you know, it's inspiring. It's inspiring to see women coming forward and demanding dignity, demanding sovereignty of their bodies, demanding an end to dictatorships that would say otherwise. And as we see in Iran, which has been so extremely, um, the dictatorship has been so oppressive of women's rights in Iran. I am hoping, I really do hope, that women in this country may, in fact, become inspired to take to the streets and demand dignity and sovereignty over our bodies in this country as well. I think that it is far past time for a global uprising of women to say enough is enough, a death to the patriarchy everywhere.
You know, and it reminds me of the death of George Floyd in that video and photography had something to do with the depth of the explosion, the strength of the explosion. The reason, well, you recall that there were videos made as George Floyd was being casually crushed to death and strangled. People were begging him to stop, and all that came out. Or they were begging those cops to stop. A second one just got sent down for several years. I noticed yesterday.
Mhm.
But in the case of the Iranian woman, this woman, as you were saying, the scrap of cloth on her head wasn't adjusted properly, they said. And the way that they lied about it was guaranteed to infuriate anyone because before all the riots started, a photograph came out of this woman. What's her name? Masa.
Masa Amini.
Masa, laying in a comatose state. Uh, the cops had cut off her nose. They had cut off her nose, and it was obviously she had bruises all over. She had been beaten to death, and then they are so arrogant and so confident in their power. They tried to lie about it and say that she had an unrelated heart attack while she was in custody. No, they very obviously beat her to death. So I can see why women are screaming and jumping up on the top of police cars and stamping dents into it. Yeah. And I had an experience of meeting religious enforcers once when I was at the University of Texas, and my then girlfriend was visited by the local mullahs. She'd been narked off with some people in the cooperative where I was living. And what a bunch of weenies. I mean, these are people who could not possibly make it with a woman on their own, and so they hate women. And two women haters came over to try to enforce Islamic clothing and also to tell her not to be my girlfriend. It was disgusting. I mean, this is an aspect of patriarchy that it's just it's Islamic flavor. I'm not down on Islam, but oh my God.
But if we look at this country and the fact that women's rights have been jettisoned back 50 years, and that there's a Supreme Court that would like to, jettison them back a little bit further, this is not limited in any kind of way to Islam. There is a streak that is huge in this country at this time to bring back the good old days of women's oppression, of women really being incubators, and and of course only cis women being recognized at all. And so again, I want to see that global uprising of women saying enough, that we are half the population of this damn planet, and that our bodies are to be governed by ourselves, that we are fully people, we have souls, regardless of what some council 1500 years ago may have thought, um, that enough is enough, that we want full we demand full rights, reproductive rights, rights in the marketplace, rights on this planet, period.
It was shocking to me to read, what the reactionary plotters want, with the Supreme Court, the Clarence Thomas gang, let's call them. They really want Gilead. No kidding. It's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, it's very true.
So climate change, climate freak storm Fiona is rushing towards, get this, Canada, where preparations for the arrival of a formerly tropical storm are being rushed to completion. Fiona knocked out the power in Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, an easy task in these days because of Trump corruption and the disgusting spectacle of an underfunded actual colony state still under the heel of Uncle Sam as if it were 1898. However, even if the power system were as resilient as a modern country, let's say Japan or Finland, I won't say Texas, Puerto Rico would still be horrifically pounded by flooding and mudslides. And now it will be interesting to see if President Biden has better sense and heart than President Trump, in which case he would cheerlead a massive rescue and modernization effort in Puerto Rico instead of poor-mouthing Trump style, saying they don't have the money, tossing a roll of paper towels for the cameras, and allowing corrupt non-MPs to suck
the
up
paper towel
the paper
toss.
towel incident. I mean, if you can't...
I forgot for just a moment, that might have gotten to the back of my mind.
That
Thanks.
could
Thanks
be
for
good.
bringing that straight back forward.
Yep. Well, if
Here, have some paper towels.
Democratic Party's got a free run on that, all they have to do is do the right thing, and the paper towel will be right back there on the video runs.
Jesus.
Easy win for the Democratic Party, but there's every chance they'll rest on their imperial racist habits and try to change the media subject rather than help. And for Nova Scotia, well, welcome to the tropics. Palm trees, anyone? Say, did we destroy Exxon, BP, and Shell and seize their assets yet? Someone should check on that. You have another headline item?
Well, I want to sort of comment on that. We've been talking a lot this week about colonialism, right? In the death of Lizzie Bett, and it's interesting because there's so many folks. Let's call them white Brits mostly, but white Americans too, by and large, that are just dumbfounded by the fact that people may be upset about the Queen and the monarchy in general. And it's sort of brought into some sharp relief the uh, horrors of the monarchy in the fact that it is a symbol, it's beyond a symbol, it is a colonial power. And I think that it's important to really look at how colonialism, racism, and climate change are inextractably interlinked. Um, for a lot of for a really good talk on this, a really good talk. Again, I'm going to refer people to Democracy Now. This morning, there was an incredible interview by a woman named Michaela Loach. She's a climate and justice activist in the UK, and really everyone should see it. She makes the case interlinking, the well, she makes the case for the intersectionality of climate change, uh, imperialism, colonialism, capitalism, and racism. And I think that 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 connection cannot be ignored. As she points out, Shell was basically given Nigeria by the Queen, by, well, not by the Queen necessarily, by the monarchy, by the colonialization process. Um, it's in fact resource extraction that drove colonialism, right? And it's resource extraction that has by and large got us where we are today in a world where we are watching a third of Pakistan still underwater in a flood that's killed over 1,400 people, in the floods in Puerto Rico that we are talking about, that Teresa just talked about now. Also, flooding throughout Nigeria. Heavy rainfall has led to dams breaking. Huge parts of Nigeria have lost fields and farms, which not only is going to have huge economic impact for the farmers this year, but also has huge impact for global hunger next year, right? And so this is a devastating uh, snowballing effect of climate change. That climate change is driving world hunger, and that where we don't have floods, we have droughts in the American West, and also droughts in Ethiopia, Northeast Africa, that is leading to famine there. And so it's really, if you can't see that we're not talking about climate change sometime in the future, that it is in fact unfolding and happening all around us right now in real time. I don't know what to tell you. It is devastating. It is happening, and it's best that we act like the world's on fire because it is. Well, the parts of it that aren't underwater.
I agree, and I would like to see the return of small action squads, 1990s style, six-person, say,
Well, sorry.
protest squads who go out, undertake an action, and have an exit strategy in place so they're gone before the police are there. This is the sort of thing that you can do with a few of your friends. You can guess what sort of political gesture to make.
Well, I think that it's important to know that there have been sustained nonviolent demonstrations over this last week. There have been sit-ins in front of the Senate and Congress, congressional offices. Schumer has been targeted for protests for sit-ins, particularly because there are the deals that he and Manchin have made that don't address climate change, that in fact are giveaways to the oil industry. So more of that, lots more of that. We, again, need to be acting like our house is on fire, because it is.
Yeah, the really, really hard thing, the thing that I wonder if it will actually happen is we have to take power. We have to take power.
Kind of like women have to take power.
Yeah.
Kind of like time for people to say enough, enough. You cannot keep killing us with capitalism. You cannot keep killing us with racism, with sexism. That we have had enough.
So, another headline.
Well,
Shall
you
I
got
do
one?
Yeah. It's about Russia. People across the world have been poised last night. This is straight from MSN mainstream news. And last night, meaning night before last, to listen in to the latest announcements from the Kremlin. Hours passed by without any sign of Putin, and eventually it was confirmed the broadcast had been postponed until morning. In the eventual speech, chilling warnings were issued over Russia's willingness to use nuclear weapons, alongside details on mobilization of thousands of new troops. They're getting nastier and nastier, it is true. For example, a town that the Ukrainians had taken back was attacked with thermite rain, which is the 21st century version of massive firebombing. And unfortunately, there's a video on YouTube where you can see this bright flaming stuff. It looks like fireworks come down and set the whole town on fire. So, anti-civilian in intent. Rumors have since spread that the 13-hour delay in issuing the broadcast from Putin came as doctors urgently treated Putin. Medics tended to the Russian president behind the scenes of filming, according to the General SVR Telegram channel. So there's more on that at MSN. And related from the Department of Defense, these are strange days indeed when I'll quote the Department of Defense. But Putin has called up 300,000 Russian reservists for his unjust and unprovoked war in Ukraine. He also directly rattled his nuclear quiver. Of course, they're lying. They provoked that war intentionally. Anyway, his actions follow a Ukrainian counteroffensive that pushed Russian forces from Kharkiv and liberated more than 3,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. In August, DoD policy chief Kolenkov said Russians have lost between 50,000 and 70,000 service members in its war on Ukraine. And while I'm quoting the DoD, I want to make some things clear first. They're probably lying about those numbers, but even if it's half that much, it's very, very significant because that's just too many troops to lose in that kind of invasion, given the state of Russia. And the other thing I want to say is that, Slava Ukraini. It's collective punishment, it's invasion, it's imperialism, and the Ukrainians have every right to fight back all the way back to their borders. Putin's mobilization, they write, would primarily be reservists or members of the Russian military that had retired. These are not like reserve formations in the United States. The reserve components of the U.S. military are trained and ready to move in hours, days, or weeks as needed. In the Russian model, these are people who have finished their service commitment and are being called to come back. Reiter is quoted saying, "It's our assessment that it would take time for Russia to train, prepare, and equip these forces. They just don't have the money that the U.S. does in their military system." And related also, Russian Navy submarine armed with a strategic nuclear torpedo the size of a school bus was delivered to the Kremlin in July. Project 0852 Belgorod is based on a Russian Oscar-class guided cruise missile submarine that has been altered to accommodate 6 80-foot Poseidon nuclear torpedoes that could be armed with a warhead of up to 100 megatons. The biggest explosion that's ever actually happened in the world is 50 or 60 megatons. It was called Tsar Bomba. The idea is to position that thing off the underwater slope of the Azores to create a megaslide that would wipe out the east coast of the USA. Now, if it looks like Putin is going to go with battlefield nukes, the first U.S. response is likely to be either massive second strike genocide or possibly tit for tat torpedo and death bomb attack on those submarines, also with battlefield sized nukes, say 10 kiloton. Interesting times, huh? Oh, by the way, I'd like to add some intuitive musings from astrology. Um, Jupiter is at its maximum proximity. When it was at its maximum proximity in 1904, Japan attacked Russia, and Russia lost that war. It was eventually concluded with the Treaty of Portsmouth, mediated by U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt. The complete victory of the Japanese military surprised international observers and transformed the balance of power in both East Asia and Europe. In 1963, the sinking of the the nuclear-powered USS Thresher was blamed on Russia. The assassination of Kennedy was blamed on Russia, and neither accusation was true, and both lies led to major U.S. military buildup against the USSR. So, interesting times and interesting astrologically for me.
All right.
All right.
Libby has decided to join us.
And to split.
Well, sort of split.
So we shall see.
I was just trying to, let's just say, intercept her from stepping on the keyboard and disconnecting us, as she has occasionally in the past. Right. So, in a recent I don't even know, from the threat of nuclear annihilation to, the world being on fire and or underwater, let's talk about one of the things that drives us, and that is fascism. We are looking at a rise of global fascism in a few ways. Um, we have the Italian election coming up quite soon, where the Brothers of Italy party are, uh, people are guessing that they are going to be winning, and the woman who is in front is, really has been campaigning on an anti-immigrant, far right, fascist platform.
They
basically.
are directly historically linked to Mussolini.
Indeed, and in her youth, she was praising Mussolini pretty much flat up. Uh, so there's that. We know that Le Pen has made great gains in France. Uh, we know that Liz Truss is no bowl of cherries in the UK. I mean, is she a fascist? She's certainly a corporatist. And certainly, I mean, she came from a shell corporate background. And so we watch her immediately trying to reopen oil fields that had been not working lately. So there's concern globally, and then there's what's been happening at home. And so uh, let's talk about a recent rally in Youngstown, Ohio, by Trump. It was last week. Um, and really, it just shows that we've gone off the fucking rails. That the rally this was a campaign rally, but really, there was very little about the campaign. It was a whole lot of Trump doing Trump. So there's blasting music that seems very close, eerily close, to a QAnon sort of theme song. And the Trump team says that no, it just might sound similar to you, but it's got a whole different name. And if you hear them side by side, they sound like the same song, but other than that, who knows?
Or a big badge that said Q.
Yeah, so he is just directly now playing to Q. After how do we say, with no credibility for years, after going, I don't really know, I don't know anything about them, but I've heard they're very good people. I don't know anything about them. I think we can now say he has decided to just flat out, not just dog whistle to Q, but as Teresa mentioned, wear the Q lapel pin, blast Q music, and basically go full Q. Media Matters has noted that Trump's use of the tune in August, posting an anti Biden rant to his website, Truth Social, sparked praise and great excitement in the online Q community. They said, well, it might be the biggest nod they've ever given us, to be honest. It's not an accident. Team Trump knows exactly what they're doing. So The Q followers certainly believe that, he's been nodding their direction for a while. And now, again, we've gone straight off the fucking rails. This week, as legal filings expose the seriousness of a federal probe into his taking classified documents to Mar-a-Lago, and prosecutors are turning up the heat on close allies around the January 6th insurrection, we're watching a very panicky Trump going full Q in a posting spree on Truth Social, including a photo of the ex president wearing the Q lapel pin over the key slogans of the conspiracy that a storm is coming and WWG, 1WGA, otherwise known as Where We Go One, We Go All. The most striking thing about Trump's Wagnerian moment in Youngstown on Saturday was the reaction of the crowd in the not full arena, many of whom raised their right arm toward forward as the music swelled. Most raised up their index finger in the number one symbol, indicative of the QAnon slogan, uh, and basically say, "Yeah, we got it. We are all together in this." Several even flashed that Q hand signal. The photos and videos of mass zombie like right arm obedience to America's wannabe dictator rekindled chilling memories of the Nuremberg rallies or Leni Riefenstahl documentaries of the terrible places that cult like devotion can, in fact, lead.
That was Neo trying to take. Neo's a blanket stealing dog.
And
He
Neo
sees our
has,
background as a blanket, so he's trying to take it.
and it could happen. If the sun falls behind us, you'll know that there is a very old Great Dane that is happy and warm. Um,
He'll steal the blankets while we're sleeping.
it's true. Okay, I'm going on. I'm going on.
All right.
All right. So this article from here on is actually from Common Dreams, a fabulous site for news. So Trump is counting on this full Q press to save him. He told interviewer Hugh Hewitt that there'd be problems in this country, the likes of which perhaps we've never seen before if he's criminally indicted. Experts in authoritarianism who saw videos of the Youngstown rally said that they are alarmed at the increasingly fascistic tone of his movement and his blatant appeals to violence. Seth Kotler, a Willamette University historian focused on the far right, called the rally a validation of his prediction that Trump was headed towards something more closely resembling a warlord. At this point, his rallies mostly just involve him pointing at enemies of the people and waiting for his supporters to do the rest, said Seth Kotler. Ruth Bangyet agreed. She's a New York University historian who studies dictators. She says that Trump is a national security threat. He is radicalizing QAnon people further and exposing others at these rallies. He is preparing them to be his next army of thugs, ready to do his bidding when he needs them. That's Ruth Bangyet, a New York University historian who studies dictators. Some people like to pretend that this is strictly